Welcome, everybody. Thanks for showing up on day one. We haven't even had the keynote from AWS yet, and we're here in a session. It's kind of new. I was just talking back there. It used to be that the sessions didn't start until the keynote happened. Now we're right out of the gate. So thank you for everybody showing up literally like as the whole conference is starting. We're going to get started on how automating cloud operations accelerated time to market for Nubank, or New, as we should call them now, the updated name. And I have Vitor with me, who's been a great customer of ours over the years. I'm going to kick it off, and we're going to talk a little bit about cloud ops in general and how we see the cloud as Spot by NetApp. But then I'm going to turn it on over real customer experience, and Vitor is going to bring you through what they do at Nubank, not only with Spot, but just how they scale and how they operate and how they use AWS to do that. So. Well, that's us. So getting right into it, where we focus a lot of our time at Spot by NetApp is on a particular persona. It's being called platform engineering now, DevOps, SRE, IT, they kind of get wrapped together. We can argue the nuances between the new platform engineering term versus DevOps term and things like that. But at the end of the day, there is a team or a group, either embedded engineering or in operations, where their job is, hey, you got to operate, build, and deploy everything that we're giving you. And you got all these crazy requirements that come in from the sides, like how are you going to use generative AI? How are you going to produce this for gaming, logistics? Like there's all these different outputs that this team has to think about on how they're going to support all of these different things that they're being asked to support. So there's a lot of obstacles here, right? So we've kind of come along this journey. When the whole DevOps movement came out, it was all about like, hey, you're going to own the whole stack. And that, every application you deliver is going to have its own stack, and it's going to be like this nice and neat thing, and you're going to support all the technology in it. And then when you figure out at scale, hey, you have to, there's some give and take, right? Like everything embedded in the engineering team, it works to a point, but you do need an operations team that's going to take care of certain things. You need an easy way to deploy resources across your organization, right? If you have too many silos of how things are being done, it leads to inefficiencies across the board. That increases burdens on budget, resources, just people you have in your organization who understand and know how to do things, right? There has to be some sort of centralization going on in an organization when it gets to a certain size. That size is different for everybody. Like starting small, I think the true pure DevOps process is still like a very good thing. It's a way to get moving fast and a way to get everybody aligned. But at scale, if you have too many of those pockets across your organization, the polyglot gets way too much, right? And it's hard to maintain, it's hard to hire for, it's hard to keep going. And that introduces performance and reliability concerns across your organization. How is one team working with another team? Are APIs good enough? Do things actually need to work closer together? So this platform engineering movement has really kind of come out of that DevOps movement in, hey, how do I standardize, automate, and optimize what I'm doing for the organization? Now, this doesn't always have to be for the entire organization. It can be part of it or part of a group. But you need to think, hey, everything can't be piecemeal, but you don't want to go back to the whole other way where like everything's all one unit again. So, if I have these one-time tools or processes, how do I standardize on what I'm doing there? And then of course, automation. I mean, this is the great thing that DevOps kind of brought us from the beginning is start codifying and automating everything you do. That helps you move faster. It also, gets you a way that you can define by code what you're doing, right? And if you're defining it by code, that's a repeatable process over and over again that you keep moving with. And then the last piece, which has really popped up in the cloud world lately, is optimize, right? So it's great that you can standardize on some tools, and it's great that you're automating them. But man, especially with cloud, things can kind of get out of whack real quick. It's really, really awesome. I remember the first time, more than a decade ago, starting to use cloud. I got all these endpoints as an engineer. I don't have to ask for procurement. I don't have to ask for someone to go buy a server. Right? I just have an endpoint and a service, and it's magical. The other point is as an engineer back then, I also didn't really care about costs or if I was over provisioning or doing all of these different things. So you've got to tie all these three together. And you got to be able to visualize it. You have to have the data to understand it. And then you have to have the insights to actually optimize and move forward with what you're doing. So we've been talking about this, for the past few slides, where we're coming from is kind of these apps where you were saying like, hey, teams run independently, deploy, scale, monitor, do everything you need for your application, run it, deploy it as an endpoint. There are very few companies in the world that can continue to operate at this model at scale. I think AWS is one of those, by the way. They have a model similar to this, and I think they do very well at it. It takes a ton of time and investment, to operate like this. I think where most companies, especially who use the cloud, end up is somewhere similar to the simplified approach on the right, where there's a certain core set of services that your platform engineering team is taking care of, whether it's your database services, your deployment services, how you optimize the cloud, how you do security, compliance, governance, different things like that. Like that has to be shared. If you have too many teams you're building, think about all the duplicate roles you have to hire in all the application teams to get it going. So this is really where we talk about like, what is this team, how are they orchestrating everybody together, right? Because they really have the requirements. It's not only these application teams, but they have to think about provisioning, scaling, right-sizing, monitoring. Like now, if that's not in the app team and you're working between an app team and a platform engineering team, where do you live in this world, right? Like who gets to tell who what's going on, how, when, and why, right? There has to be some give and take between these teams. So you need to set up contracts just like we do with anything else, like a civil contract that says, hey, how do I ensure the implementation of the best practices for the organization are being implemented? How do I prove consistency across deployments or how we use cloud? Because this can bring you scale. And that's the thing that you really want at the end of the day as you're growing, whether you're migrating from on-prem and using more and more and more cloud over time, or whether you're born in the cloud and you're trying to get to massive scale, you have to drive efficiency somewhere, or you have to put a ton of investment in the top side. And usually one of those things have to give. And you have to think about, hey, whose job is it to do this? Is it the application developer? Is it the platform engineer? Is it the DevOps job? And more, they're saying like, hey, we're going to develop the apps. It's going to be deployed by platform engineering. Platform engineering will give the data back to the app teams and say, hey, this is what you're doing, and then enforce certain rules on top of that. And that's kind of where the DMARC line is coming down. So one of the ways you can go about this is to build your own optimization structure, right? So when you think about your infrastructure, now you have to think about, okay, I have these app teams, they're running fast, I need to put some governance policies around my organization and how I'm going to run and get all this stuff done. If you do this, you have to think about a lot of different things. You have to think about the different pricing models that you're going to be comfortable with. Where am I going to place my resources? What are the instance types, the capacity, utilization? What are my cost allocation across everything that I'm using? Cloud is great because you can run fast and you can do a million things, and it also sucks because you can do a million things, right? I don't know how far back, anybody Perl programmers? Do we have any old Perl? I got a hand. I still get one after all these years. I'll get one. It was the same thing back then, so. Perl was a great language. You could do anything, but the problem was you could do anything. So you have to figure out how to rein that in at some point in time. So you got to balance this availability, reliability, and cost. And you got to do this whether you go with a third-party vendor or not, right? So regardless of me being from Spot by NetApp, and this is what we focus in, if you're going to use the cloud, you're going to run into this problem where you need to think about all of these things. And you have to have some sort of way you're watching it and managing it within your own organization. So how we view the world at Spot by NetApp is we have a cloud ops division at NetApp. And the cloud ops division at NetApp, surprisingly enough, doesn't necessarily focus on storage. So those of you who know NetApp in the room know that NetApp comes from a long pedigree of NAS and disk storage. We have a first-party service on AWS, FSx, and ONTAP, so we have a really good relationship with NetApp, or with AWS. And NetApp acquired Spot about 3 years ago, and we've started what is now the Cloud Ops portfolio, where we take a look at application infrastructure. So it's not just about storage, right? Storage is part of the game, and NetApp does very good at that, and we integrate with the storage side of the house. But what we really focus on is cloud infrastructure holistically. Like, we look at compute, we look at networking, we look at how you're running your containers, we look at what services are being run, we look what you're paying for in all the different cost centers that are going across your organization, and we put all of that data together to understand what is the best application infrastructure that you need to run your workloads. We're not trying to get into your workloads and get in the middle of what your workloads are doing, but we want to provide the best infrastructure the cloud has to offer for those workloads. And so we do that by first, observability. Got to understand the environment you're in. You got to understand what's around you, how you're operating, what's working, what's not. You got to understand how you're going to optimize, and you need to do this from day one, or it's harder and harder to do as you go along, right? If you start releasing and you start pushing infrastructure that is either over-provisioned or unallocated, or you don't know what's going on, it is harder to pull that infrastructure back, right? My lifespan spans the data center and the cloud. In the data center days, I used to talk about like, okay, I don't know what that server's doing. Who's going to press the power button on it, right? Like, we're pretty sure it does nothing, but does it actually do nothing? The same thing can happen in the cloud, like the same thing, right? So if you start over-provisioning and start getting out of hand too quick because you're not thinking about optimization from the beginning, you can end up in that same situation. You don't want to get there. If you are there, what's good about the cloud is there's a lot more data about what you've done, a lot more. And so you can do a lot of introspection on your cloud environment and figure out what's happening. So the third piece is automation. You don't do anything in the cloud without automation, really. And I know that's a strong statement, and I know all of us do some level of manual work out there. But really, you want to drive as much as possible to automating what you do. There is too many endpoints. There is too many configuration policies. There's just too much for any person or even group of small people to handle from a manual effort. You will break down. So there is a place for ClickOps. It shouldn't be the first, right? You automate first, back into what you might have to do manually later. I'm one of those people who I always realize that there's a mantra you go for, but there are situations where you'll need to pull back and do something slightly different. But you should push towards automation. It has to be there. And then open source services. Open source is such a big part to what we're doing nowadays, and the open source world has so much to offer. But how do you manage those open source services? So it's not enough to say you go out and use your favorite open source project. Who do you have on your team to actually manage that? And who's the throat to choke when something goes wrong? Now, I think that used to be an argument for saying like, oh, vendor or open source. I think open source is definitely I think you should embrace open source, but you should also think about it in a way of who's holding the bag, right? And you can do that in a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different vendors out there doing open source support. We do it for open source data services. NetApp acquired a company called InstaCluster, which helps us with that. There's other companies out there that do the same, but you do have to make that decision with open source. Am I going to fully manage and run this open source project myself and hire a team, especially depending on how big that open source implementation gets within your organization? Or am I going to go out and find vendor support for that? And that's a real decision you have to make any major open source project that you pick up and run inside your organization. So I'm just going to dig down into those a little bit here. We're going to touch on observability, optimization, automation, and open source services, and I'm going to hand it over to Vitor. But from an observability standpoint, you have a lot of infrastructure out there that you have to monitor. Everything from service endpoints to how things are running. So anything from your top level API that you have in the cloud, down to the service that you're running in that cloud, down to the possible application or VM that's actually running. And all of that data means something going up and down the stack. And the cloud is shooting data at you from everywhere. You need to be able to have a monitoring tool that's going to look at all of your infrastructure, top to bottom, identify potential problems, analyze, detect, and remediate risks. You need to have something that it's identifying your idle and underused resources And you also need to start reducing the time that you spend troubleshooting. So you need to have a plan of how you're going to attack all of this data. We generate a ton of data. It's not enough to say you have Elasticsearch. It's not enough to say that you have a S3 bucket with a ton of logs in it. It's not enough to say that you turned on CloudTrail. What are you going to do with all that data, and how are you going to understand it? You need a tool for observability to make that happen. And then you need to use that data to drive the automation that you have in your environment, right? You need to take all that data, understand the insights that you're getting out of that data, and then you need to understand how you're going to use that to drive continuous automation. And what I mean by that is the automation has to continually learn from itself. You have to keep feeding it new information so it can keep understanding how you operate, because that automation ends up driving how you optimize. And you need that deep visibility into the data to understand how your next deployment is going to be better than your last deployment. And this is something that we say at Spot all the time is I want my customer's next dollar to go further than their last dollar. That's our goal. Our goal at the end of the day is for applications to run at the SLAs and SLOs that our customers want. And we need their next dollar to go further than their last dollar. And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. Everything from right sizing to finding the right instance for it to run on, to running on blends of Spot, RI, on-demand, savings plans, all the different cost models you have. What we do at Spot is we have a real-time analytics platform that's taking a look at all of this data, and then we combine that with the automation that I showed you on the other slide. So we don't just recommend what to do. We actually make decisions, and then we stand by those decisions, and we stand with our customers in their production environments, and we put ourselves on the line for the decisions that we're making. And we run in production with our customers. So we don't give recommendations and go, hey, you should really do this. Here's a list of things. Go find a few sprints worth of time and get your engineers to do it and implement it in production. We scale and run. We sit inside your Kubernetes cluster. We sit inside your cost and usage billing reports. We sit alongside the security tools that you're running today, and we integrate with everything so that we can get the best structure for everything that we're doing, whether it's buying a savings plan when you need to buy a savings plan, scaling a Kubernetes cluster when we need to scale, and we'll get into that more in a minute, but you have to make these continuous decisions. It can't be like every 6 months, hey, we're going to take a look at our cloud bill and find out what's going on, right? And we're going to alter things for the next 6 months. You got to do this every day. That's how you run a clean environment, and that's how you run an environment that scales. And then last but not least, these open source data services, right? We offer a host of open source data services from Cassandra to Kafka to OpenSearch, Redis, Spark, and Postgres, where this can sit alongside what you're doing with your Kubernetes environments, your VM environments, with the other applications and services that you're running. And you have a support mechanism, not only a support mechanism for how you're going to run these, but you also have a service that can holistically run these tools on the cloud that you're running on. So it sits alongside your applications. It's managed, it's versioned, it's completely taken care of for you, so you don't have to worry about how to move forward with an open source project. You can just worry about using the APIs for that open source project. And then you can do that as part of a platform that your platform engineers can actually use and be successful with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over, and we're going to talk about how new runs in the cloud. Take it away.
Thank you. Just press the green button. OK, thank you, Kevin. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, Victor Monteiro Puente. I'm Director of Engineering at New, taking care of a team that we call runtime platform. So we take care of the whole runtime environment, observability, all our clusters, Kubernetes clusters, et cetera. And one thing that we really care is about optimizing our costs, optimizing our efficiency in the cloud. So, well, thank you, Kevin, for inviting me. When he invited me, he said, hey, do you like to talk about all those problems that you have, in our transition? I said, yeah, is this a good idea to share the problems? But I hope that that will give you insights on all the journey that we have using Spots in production environment in a bank, right? That is new, regulated environment. We managed to do that. So to start, New, for those who don't know, Nu is a bank that was founded in 2013. Our headquarters is in Brazil, but we also have offices in Mexico and Colombia. And we also have operations in Mexico and Colombia. We are a full digital bank, no physical location, a mobile-first bank as well. And we were born to the cloud since our beginning. And we have now more than 80,000 employees for different 5 locations. This slide is to show you a little bit of the hypergrowth that we have been facing recently. This number is actually nowadays, to have a more up-to-date number, is 9 million customers that Nubank just reached a couple of weeks ago. But as you can see, we were born in 2013, and we have been growing since like 2017, then things start to get big, right? And recently, in the last years, we have been facing a lot of new customers, a lot of new features, a lot of new products, new business that we have been launched, and all of this put a lot of pressure, right, on costs. All of this, with this hypergrowth in the cloud, can like very easily make you lose control of everything that you are running, right? This is the challenge. So this is a timeline of our, let's say, tech journey to the cloud and partnership with Spot. We started, as we said, in 2013, and back then the focus was features, customers, more customers that add features, as all startups, right, in the beginning of their journey. But since the beginning, more or less, like once we start to get things up and running, we were very concerned about quality, about making things right, about making things efficient. So we bootstrap this DevOps team, but we like to say that, sorry, DevOps for us is not a team, it's a culture, right? We embrace the you build it, you want it. So our focus, as now the team is called Runtime Platforms, inside the foundation business area, we say that we are only the providers of tools, of libraries, of all the platforms to accelerate and to make it easier for all other business inside Nu to manage with cloud resources and to optimize their workloads. This is our idea, okay? And more or less in the 2018, it was when we started to talk about using Spot as one way of optimize our costs in the cloud. Since that, we have evolved a lot. And more recently, we are going deep in our journey, trying to decentralize even more costs, have a more fine-grained control over our cloud resources, as I will show you in the next slides, okay? But as I mentioned, all of this hyper-growth, all of these new customers, new features, and all of these new areas, there are new teams, right? Like they are using, they were created at Nu. This brings us a lot of challenges, and this challenge, while we were growing and adding this new capability to make more efficient using Spot instance that I would like to share with you. I bring here three. There was three big ones. So first of all, when we started to use Spot, we had, I would say not a problem, but it was, we were very worried about optimizing service allocation. So putting the service in the right node, in the right instance type, right? We have a set of specific cases, and this is where the things get very difficult, right? Like because the common and the general services, it's easy to use, but we have very specific case, and I'm pretty sure that everyone here has some specific case. They were not behaving well, and we talked to Spot and say, you need some kind of help in developing some feature in order to optimize the use for this specific case, as I will show, okay? Also, we have some latency-sensitive services. For those who don't know, we have a real-time payment feature backed by the central bank from Brazil called PIX. It has a very aggressive SLA, and within this SLA, we have a lot of GTP calls, a lot of different systems involved, so it's very hard to get to that SLA. And one thing that we face is that using Spots, when the node was claimed by AWS, when they got took from AWS, it restarted a Kafka rebalance operation. So Kafka had to rebalance all the queues that we were being applied to the consumers. This generated a little delay, and that delay compromised the real-time payment transfer side. So latency-sensitive services was a challenge for us back then when we started to adopt. And I will show also how Spot helped us to surpass that challenge. First and last but not least, the volatility of the market. Okay, so spots market will fluctuate from time to time. And it's also important you to be sure that this is being handled well, okay, by your infrastructure overall. I will also show to how we did that, okay? So these three things were three things that while we were moving to use more spot were things that we noticed and we have to take care on how to deal with each of them. And as I said, hey, I will talk about the problems, okay? I will talk about the things that we have to work hard to surpass. But the good part is that Spot, let's go, okay. Spot helped us a lot, you know, implementing some features and adjusting some parts of the Spot platform that helped us to surpass this challenge. On the challenge 1 and 2, so on having the specific workloads optimized for the best nodes and also the latency-sensitive services, one feature that we implemented was the virtual node groups, and we segregate our infrastructure on those virtual node groups. So this picture represents like before we have all workloads on kind of, let's say, the same clusters. But then, as I said, some workloads does not behave well because of the spot nature. And we need to segregate these specific services in a different node. And this is what we did with the virtual node group. So we created two virtual node groups, and we specialized one to just run Spot and another one to roll on-demand instance. All the latency-sensitive services, all the very specific workloads that needs to be on-demand is on-demand. Other workloads are in the Spots, and that helped a lot, Spot.io, to manage those workloads and to make the best usage of their algorithms to choose the best nodes and have the best cost efficiency for us. This is what actually also allowed us to go very further on the Spot utilization. Just talking a little bit about Spot on the levels we have today, we have more or less 17 to 80% of all our infrastructure running on Spot instance. So we actually just do not go more than that because there are this 20% that is less. It's the specific workloads that we on purpose do not want to go run in Spot. But with that, we were able to use the majority of the services with that. And this, as I said, guaranteed that the problem one, that allocating the right node to the right services was able, and the latency-sensitive services, which is something that maybe people here sometimes have the business and is worried, right? Like if I have a very latency-sensitive service and then machine is claimed and you have this problem of need to get this extra time of getting another pod is something that you cannot afford. Okay, you can use this kind of architecture and leverage Spot.io as well with you to this problem, okay? To the third problem, which was the problem of the market volatility. Well, I think this is good because when we started the beginning of our journey back in 2018, as I will show, we were concerned, right? Like, hey, the market can just go up and down. You can have spots, but then sometimes the market does not tell you, or the AWS does not show to you how is the request for spot instance or not. You just start seeing that you got a fewer nodes on runtime. You know, like you just start seeing this. And as you can see here, this is just we noticing on the blue bars. That spot availability was decreasing, so the blue bars, which is the on-demand, was start increasing, and the green bar, which is the spot, starting decreasing on the percentage on our infrastructure environment. But here's the thing, like with Spot.io, we have a controller in our Kubernetes clusters that helped us to manage this node allocation specifically, and we tried it, and this is represented the fallback mechanisms working very well. So if you don't have a Spot instance, this happens automatically. This automatically fall back to OD, and you have an OD being provisioned, and you don't have any surprise. The beautiful thing of this is that we did nothing. We just watched all our automations working, making fallbacks to OD, and then, and this is even more important, making fallback to Spot once the Spot market got back to normal again. Like, because it's just not just fall back to OD and then leave OD, because then your costs would be exploding, right? It do also goes fall back to spot instance as well as the market start to go. So this is something that people usually ask us a lot. Hey, how do you deal with market volatility? And it's actually pretty straightforward and pretty automated. We don't worry with this. We will also have another example. We have already seen tons of volatility on the market, and all of them handle it pretty well with the spot. Okay, so this is also here what we would like to show, like, is how you can. Our journey to adopting, as we show an example of 2019, when it's very hard to see, but on top of the 2019 graph, there is a start of a gray bar where it was our first experiments with spot usage. And we started to use and we started to experiment that step by step, like trying to put that some part of infrastructure, seeing how it was behaving. We start to see some concerns that I have already shown to you, and then we start to talk and start to understand how we can deal with those concerns. On 2020, we were already reaching more or less 50% of our infrastructure running on spot. And there's a specific event over there. If you see on November 2020, then we got like very few spots, and this was a Black Friday, and we were very concerned, right? Because Black Friday is a period of the year that all customers of AWS, they got a lot of over-provisioned because they want to survive to the Black Friday. They don't want to have an availability. And we were kind of worried about the market volatility. Hey, would we run without spots on the market volatility because of the market volatility? And maybe got some instability on our production environment. So if you see on this period, we put a little bit of our infrastructure on gray. And this is because also talking a little bit about the Unibank stack, we have a cell-based infrastructure. We call prototypes. We have several prototypes in our infrastructure, and we leave just one of them with spots, and that helped us to verify the spot availability on Black Friday. It was pretty well. Since then, we have done all Black Fridays with no change at all in our capacity. We run all Black Fridays with the spot market with the same configurations that we have on a regular day. And this is very good. This has helped a lot us to also improve and optimize costs, improving our unit metrics cost, okay? So the one thing that I also would like to highlight in our journey is all this improvement that we have done on spot platform. This have helped us a lot. I would like to highlight 3 of them. One is like we have changed it back then from one instance type to fallback to multiple instance types to fallback. This is something that helped us a lot. Recently, not that much far in the past, like we have added also the ARM configuration to add a mixed strategy on the virtual node group, so we can have ARM instance and Intel instance in the same node group. So it's also good for us to adopt the Graviton and use the best of each node that we have on that journey that I said to you to use the right node to the right service that we have. And we have other ones, and the last but not least, actually the last one is very important. We have done tons of improvements on the SDK, on the software development kit, and the APIs, the spot. They're a very good partner on that, helping us editing these features that we have been requesting. And it was fun fact that we discovered, they give us this feedback that we do not use their UI, their user interface. We just use their API. That's true. We are very heavy users of their SDKs and API. And we discovered that, like we weren't even noticing about that, but we discovered when a customer asked to do a benchmark with us, hey, we would like to understand how you use Spot. And then we're asking a lot of things about the user interface. They haven't said, well, we don't know, we use the API. I don't know, but this other feature, do you know this panel? Well, like, it's good for sure, but we don't know. We use the API. And it's something that we really recommend, and we think that it's a good API. Use it. As Kevin was saying, automation's in the core of everything. It will help you a lot, will foster everything that you want to do. We are heavy users of their API, and we think that's a good way to deal also with all that problems, okay? So with that was loud, sorry. Where we are today. So, well, we have high levels of spot usage, more or less 70%. This depends on the time. Sometimes we reach to 80. As I said, we reach to 80% and we don't go further because we don't want. But we usually have 70% of our nodes in production running on spots. We had an average saving of 60% on AWS compute cost when adopting in the end of this journey. This is awesome. And Spot instance is being used in other environments other than production. So we have a CI/CD environment. We are using Spot instance in our data environment, which is completely separate environment. We are using Spot instance as well as some other environments that we have at New today. And where are we going, right? Go. So the feature that we want, since we now have this environment, is really focus on automation. We want to get the most data that we can from the platform, understand where is the right node and where is the right workload, and do that match. So we want to run our services where is the best front end to run to be optimized. We want to go further on cost management. So as I said, we started to optimize and to get the DevOps culture back in the future. But now we are really decentralizing all of this and making even more fine-grained decisions and fine-grained optimizations being from the accountability for the business units that we have at New. And this is important for us to enhance and to optimizing even more in the cloud. And as I said, like we want to enhance our platform so we have the right node for the right workload. That's it. That was our journey. That was some of the challenges that we have faced, some of the problems that we have been to deal with. I'm happy to answer questions in the end or offline or talk a little bit before. If you have any. With that, I come back to you, I think, to talk about it.
I think we have one more slide here. So thank you very much, Vitor. One of our earliest customers who joined us when we were very early on, the name of the company, Spot Inst, starts very close to Spot instances. We've been managing a lot more, use a lot more of our platform today, but I think it's an amazing journey that we've been on together. Yeah. And we love having customers that push us really hard to solve these hard problems, again, at scale. When you get at scale, the problems are very different than when you're starting out and testing everything in your environment before you go use it. Having 90 million customers and seeing the throughput that you have to have for that is kind of amazing. And it pushes our team as well to build better and better features on how to optimize. So, with that, that's the advertisement at the end, for everybody. Come by our booth, 950. I just came from there in the expo hall. The expo hall is coming together. It looks really nice in there, but if you need to understand or you're interested on how your workloads need to run in the best possible way on AWS, keep them available, scale them, and keep them optimized, that's what we do. That's what we love doing, and we have a lot of different ways to do that. Not only running Spot instances, but how you understand your cost structure, how you right-size a Kubernetes environment, how you right-size your VMs when they're scaling, how do you take your security governance compliance standards to the next level. We have everything that your platform engineering team needs to deliver to the rest of your organization. So you can hit us up, spot.io, as Vitor mentioned a few times during the talk. There's the email, the website, and the booth. And of course, we'll answer any questions here that we can.